Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for all the work that you do with Tarpol. But particularly, I say how honoured I am to be here speaking after Carmel, and it's an impossible act to follow, because she's a legend. She's absolutely fantastic, and the work that she's done over the last 40 years that Tarpol has been in existence has been extraordinarily influential, and I'm very honoured to have been associated with it all that time. I only think that it was a pity that the International Criminal Court wasn't invented a little bit sooner, because then Suharto would definitely have been one of the heads of state arraigned before that body, tried and I hope convicted. The only shame is that the International Criminal Court manages to nab so few of the people who deserve to be brought before it, and so few of them are finally convicted and punished. But the institution is there. It is at least a deterrent to dictators like Suharto if they want to do the similar things that he did, particularly the enormous number of political prisoners, of whom, as you heard, Carmel was one. And it's terrible to think of the suffering that those people endured. She had to put up with 3 years of harsh conditions as a political prisoner, held without charge and with a number of other women in the appalling conditions that they had to endure. And it was only 2 years later that she founded Tarpol, as you heard. After she was liberated, she came back to England here, and she founded the organisation that we're celebrating today, the 40th anniversary. It's been her life work, and over that period we've heard that this has broadened its interest, not only from dealing with the political prisoners whose liberation it was formed to secure originally, but now to coordinate the work that voluntary organisations do on peace, human rights and democracy in Indonesia. Unfortunately, there are still political prisoners in Indonesia, and at the end of May there were, I understand, 76 Papuan prisoners, 30 of whom had been held simply for peaceful demonstrations commemorating the 50th anniversary of the illegal transfer of Papua to Indonesia. And 3 demonstrators were in fact killed during the process of those arrests by the Indonesian security forces, the latest in a very long line of victims. But there have been some major successes to set against the continuing human rights violations that we see in Indonesia. We heard already about the achievement of East Timor's independence. After a long and arduous struggle, it was a major achievement for which Tarpol campaigned relentlessly and deserves a share of the credit for the final solution. With Carmel's encouragement and support, as you heard from Paul, I founded the Parliamentarians for East Timor with Satsuki Eda of Japan and Tony Lamb of Australia. I went to the United Nations and spoke in the Third Committee with Jose Ramos Horta, and we met many times, mainly in Lisbon, to promote the cause of Timorese independence. And Tarpol's work on Aceh also was key in raising conscientiousness on an issue that would otherwise have been overlooked by the UK and other states, and one that was of particular concern to me, because when Aceh was invaded by the Dutch in 1873, my great-grandfather's brother denounced the invasion and the occupation in the House of Lords. And as a result of that, I had a close connection with the Aceh Sumatra National Liberation Movement, and particularly with Hassan Litiro, who was at that time the leader of it, and who was a descendant of the hereditary rulers of Aceh over many centuries until it was conquered in 1873. But whether it was in my genes or not, I don't know, but I took up the cause of Aceh and was a strong advocate of the rights of the peoples there to self-determination. I've always thought that self-determination was the most important of the human rights that are enshrined in the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and also on economic, social and cultural rights. It's Article 1 in both of those covenants, and that emphasises the importance that was given to it by the United Nations when the covenants were drafted in 1960. I think, however, that the United Nations and the international community as a whole were entirely focused on the rights of people who were the victims of Salt Sea imperialism, the European powers mainly, and they neglected the rights of people who were the victims of local imperialism. The people who were dominated by close neighbours and occupied for centuries without there being any international action on their part. The colonies of the Soviet Union, for example, the colonies of the new Indonesian state, the colonies in Africa, for example, of Eritrea, and now today of Somaliland. We see the violations of the right of self-determination still continuing because it's being given insufficient attention, and that was certainly the case in Aceh. We did manage, in the end, as you heard, to secure the political solution of Aceh after, first of all, 3 years of arduous negotiations in Geneva, which finalised in a peace agreement. Then that was broken, and then Martti Ahtisaari came in, the former Finnish president, to finish the job off, and in 2005 to achieve a political settlement that was acceptable to the people of Aceh, even though they didn't gain their full independence. They gained a substantial degree of autonomy and a degree of possession over the mineral rights, which were extremely important considering that Aceh is one of the principal producers of oil and gas. I must conclude by saying how proud I am to have been on this platform and to have been able to share this work over the last 40 years with Carmel, and to say that it hasn't finished yet. The 40 years that TARPOL has existed doesn't mean to say that it's come to the end of the work. In Aceh we have a solution, but in Indonesia as a whole there are huge human rights problems. Capital punishment, having been abolished for 4 years, was resumed in March. You heard about the ongoing problems in Papua, not only the political prisoners, but violations of the rights of freedom of expression and assembly, to which attention has recently been drawn by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty. The refusal of the visit by the UN Rapporteur on freedom of expression, Frank LaRue, who went to Indonesia but was denied admission to Papua. So many more cases that one could mention, including, finally, military impunity that Paul drew attention to. It's not gone away, it's still there. People who commit violations of human rights as members of the armed forces are hardly ever tried and practically never convicted. So may TARPOL continue their invaluable work for as long as major violations of the human rights of the people of Indonesia continue, and may Carmel be there to see the successes that they achieve.